very nice perspective. Indeed, the smoke that we that education, business, private school. I think it's
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Boydell Brewer, and I'm from the Johannesburg Holocaust Genocide Centre. Welcome to this special event that we are hosting tonight as the Johannesburg Holocaust Genocide Centre in a partnership with the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Those of you who are joining us via Zoom, welcome. And those of you who are joining us via live stream on YouTube, welcome as well. So this is what we now refer to as a hybrid program or a hybrid event. This is our new normal. And of course, in terms of wearing our masks and following COVID protocol, I will ask you to please remain with your masks on unless you are drinking something or eating something. But however, we have to observe COVID protocols for reasons you are aware of. And also for those of you joining us via Zoom, may I please request that you keep your sound on mute throughout the event so that we don't have any background noises that will interfere with tonight's presentation. However, I do encourage you to use the chat function and the comments sections to post your questions and your comments for tonight's speakers. And our team will gather those questions and comments throughout the event and then present them to our speakers when the question and answer session begins. I wanted to begin tonight's event with a quote from Holocaust survivor Primo Levi. And this quote is featured in the permanent exhibition of the Johannesburg Holocaust Genocide Centre. And he says, "Monsters exist, but they are too few in number to be truly dangerous. More dangerous are the common man." More dangerous are the common man, the functionaries ready to believe and to act without asking questions. And I thought at this time in our world and in the world's events, I thought this quote is ever more true and unfortunately haunting still. So I'd like us to think about that today. Tonight's special event is both a book launch of The Genocide Against the Tutsi and the Rwandan Churches, Between Grief and Denial, authored by Professor Philippe Denis, published by James Currey and Boydell Brewer. I hope that is correct. Also, we are honored to have tonight's opening talk by historian, author, and outgoing president of Ibuka France, Mr. Marcel Kabanda. And his talk will be titled Rwanda, 1994, the Catholic Church at the Test of the Tutsi Genocide. Mr. Kabanda has also authored a book titled Rwanda, Racism and Genocide, published in 2013. Professor Denis, I'm sure many of you will be aware of, is a senior professor in the history of Christianity at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. His research has focused on the history of indigenous Christianity in Southern Africa, along with an interest in oral history. This has also encouraged him to reflect on issues of memory and resilience. And in 1996, he founded the Sinomlando Center for Oral History and Memory Work in Africa. And Professor Denis has also been working on the history of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda since 2014. At this time, it is my privilege to invite Mr. Marcel Kabanda to please, oh yes, I'm sorry, I'm sorry about that. It is my pleasure to invite Professor Philippe Denis to first address us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm a bit tall, I make that. Could somebody help me? Yeah. So, good evening, everybody here in Johannesburg and many other places in Rwanda, elsewhere in South Africa, in Europe. Maybe I'm not too sure, but other continents. And my first word would be a word of immense gratitude to the Holocaust and Genocide Centre in Johannesburg for hosting this presentation and this book launch. It's very meaningful to do that here. And I know a lot of work has been done into this preparation. I came here to share, of course, a book. I'm not too sure if you can see the book like this, which is, you know, when you work on a book for many years, it's quite a good reason for celebration, but it's much more than a book. It's much more than an academic project. It's even much more than an intellectual project. It's about human beings. It's a human story in which me coming from South Africa with a Belgian background, an historian, I became part of a much bigger story which was beyond me. It was very moving, sometimes disturbing, sometimes also, I would not say joyful, but encouraging, because the genocide survivors, those who helped them, and a few others are still alive, and share with me their story, and gave me they trusted me, gave me their trust. So it transformed me, so it was a life-giving event. How did it start, you may ask? Well, normally in my field of research and interest for many years, about 30 years, has been in Southern Africa. Well, it's because after the genocide, I was involved in a mediation process between members of a religious order called the Dominican Order. And I must say, I'm one of them. I'm an academic, but I'm also a member of a religious order. And also a parent, because among other things, my life has been such that I became a parent and the head of a family. And that's something to do with the genocide, because there are lots of family stories, sad or sometimes joyful, linked to the genocide. So in 1997, I was asked to help two groups of people, Hutu and Tutsi, Burundi and Rwanda, to overcome the trauma, what happened, talk to each other, listen to each other. And I picked up many things. One of them is that there was a debate about history. There was no common history. History was a site of contestation. And I continued to go to the Great Lakes area for a number of reasons. And at one point I said to myself, maybe I could try to do something to put what we know on the table, to avoid false accusation, when something wrong happened, to name it and deal with it. And to try to avoid at the same time sort of conspiracy theories, like there are so many today, but at the same time avoid also denial. Because when something like a genocide happens, a genocide is the intention to exterminate completely or partly a group for religious, political, or whatever reason, which is exactly what happened in Rwanda. It was the intention, if possible, to kill all Tutsi without exception. And they nearly succeeded. An enormous mass murder, impossible even to think, to understand, and it happened. So inevitably, there's a certain amount of denialism and contestation on facts and figures. And I say, with my training as an historian, using archives, and slowly I built up a collection of archives, and doing interviews, I ended up interviewing close to 100 people, I think 90 something, many of them many times. So hours and hours and hours of listening to people, taking notes, but also connecting with people, with experiences, doing this as critical, as rigorous a method as possible to get the best story possible on what happened. Then, because of my background as a religious person, I realized that the relationship between church and genocide is particularly contentious. There's lots of things on the internet and testimonies and this and that, either denouncing the attitude of church people or saying, no, 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 it's not true, it's this and this, refusing to be challenged. So pro and con. And I took the position to say, I'm not there to judge, the reader must read, must judge. And I hope some of you will buy the book and be a reader or find it in the library. So it's not going to be all the good and bad people, but let's try to understand as much as possible what happened and why, to contextualize. So I embarked on this journey in 2014-15, and I went, I think, 8 times to Rwanda, and I had such a, I don't know, I cannot describe the experience of getting into that story. And I don't want to be too long because I want to give some time to Marcel. I will, in a nutshell, I will tell you the main conclusion. I still need to say, my method has been to come back to, there was so much to say, I decided to focus on 2 churches only. There are many others. The Catholic Church, which is the biggest church in Rwanda, and the Presbyterian Church, the second oldest. Why? Because the Presbyterian Church in 1996 made the first and the only full confession of guilt. This is remarkable. Not often church people accept they are guilty, not common. They did. The Catholic did it half-half in the end. They still tried, but not in the same way. There's more internal debate in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is very big and complex. So I decided to focus on that. And also, I decided to look what happened before the genocide, during the genocide, and until 2000. Because the construction of the memory of the genocide is very important. How people deal with such painful and heavy memories, traumatic memories. So I thought, then I had an overview of the problem, then I decided to zoom on a case study. 2 chapters are on a place called Congonil, a certain parish near Kibuye, near the Kibu Lake. And as it happens, my friend Marcel will talk a bit later, is from there. It's a coincidence because when I approached him, I didn't even know he was from there. So he's a historian, colleague, but also witness. So I did a special study. Why? Because there was a French priest there called Gabriel Mindon, who was presented as a hero because the sort of discourse, what he saved Tutsi life, it is far more complicated. The survivors have a different story. So this contestation about the memory, about what happened in the Catholic Church in Congonil. And I found that as a case study about the debate about what happened, the memory debate, the memory conflict. And unfortunately, almost all the Tutsi were killed. Very few are still alive. I probably spoke to most of them, and we are in regular contact. So I zoomed on one area. Other thing, I don't want to tell the whole story. That's the method. So the conclusion, a few things. First of all, the Catholic Church is diverse. The response to the genocide is diverse. You find people actually who died, Tutsi, but also a certain number of Hutu, including bishops, but mostly Tutsi. So Catholic believers, but also priests, sisters, etc., died. At least 100 priests, Tutsi priests died. You've got actually also people who died because they wanted to protect those who were about to be killed. Then you have people actually who it was very important to know, it's very important to avoid a binary view. There are good, those are good, those are bad. No, it's far more complicated. Avoid a system with 2 sides. Not at all. The history is complex. But it's important to know if maybe you survive, maybe Tutsi survived because they found on their way Hutu who sheltered them or gave them bread or whatever. In fact, a quarter of the Tutsi people living in Rwanda by April 1994 survived. 3/4 died, about 1 million, between 500,000 and 1 million. Imagine, it's a lot of people, nearly 1 million. About 3/4 died, but 1/4 survived because people sheltered them. So, but of course, you have the people who kept silent, and I'll come to it in a minute. And then the people who actively, in the church, including priests, participated in the killing, which is unbelievable that happened. The power of propaganda and the power of ideology. Then a second, so there's a diversity of responses within the churches. You should not put everything in the same bag. Then there's also a diversity in the response to it over time. Some immediately recognized the horror of the genocide. Some took more time. I won't go into detail. It's a history of the memory of the genocide against the Tutsi. Then the issue of the judgment on the attitude of the church. Unfortunately, the church has been silent. Not silent really. They call for a ceasefire as if it was a normal war. And still, there was an extermination program just before their eyes. An extermination program happening there. Everybody could see it and listen on radio. And the church said nothing on that. They just say, let's stop the war. Not saying that it was not a normal war, it was a genocide. So this is something that the church is to ask forgiveness for. And as I said, they've done it to a certain point. So I think I'll stop here and ask my friend Marcel to carry on. And I hope this little event organized by the Holocaust Genocide will contribute more awareness on a number of things. What is a genocide, for example? How to remember traumatic events, how to deal with painful memories, how to build up a future for those gone through those horrible things, and also how those who are Christians, how their faith sometimes can go the wrong way, or their church belonging. And it invites the churches to rethink how to deal with painful events. This is what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Denis. We might need to know. I'm on my toes right now. Thank you. Yes. Before I invite Mr. Kabanda to address us, I'd just like to point out that downstairs we have part of our permanent exhibition. We have an exhibition that is dedicated to the history of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. So perhaps after the session, when you have time before you leave, you might like to wander downstairs and explore that amazing exhibition about the history of the 1994 genocide. So at this time, it is my privilege to invite Mr. Kabanda to please address us.
I have been already presented, but before I take floor, I want to say to you, thanks to have invited me. Thanks to Philippe for your book. Thanks to Holocaust Memorial to have organized this event. I am very happy to be here. It's my first time to come in Africa, in South Africa, not in Africa. I was born in Africa. And here it's a particular country for all of us Africans. South Africa is a country of Mandela, is a country of Steve Biko, is a country of Bishop Tutu. I knew all of these people by the media, through media, but I am here to say to you, through you here, thanks to South Africa, thanks for your Ubuntu. Ubuntu is the quality of all of us. And Ubuntu is this thing who is missing when we are confronted with genocide. I am happy to be here to speak about genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda, to say this in South Africa, and to say this in Holocaust Genocide Centre. When the first time I meet Philippe, I don't know when, but what I know is that I met him many times. I don't know when because many people come to see me and say, how can I get information about the genocide in Rwanda? How can I go to Rwanda to make research? I meet many people with this question. So I don't know when I met him for the first time. But after when he went to Rwanda, when he come back in South Africa, sometimes he passes in Paris to tell me what he learned in Rwanda, and discuss with him the question, his question, and we discuss with him the issue. I forgot to tell you that I don't speak English. So I was born in Rwanda and I live in France. In France, some people speak English, but we use French. So my English is very bad, so when you don't understand what I try to say. I was surprised when I met Philippe because he asked me, he was very clear. He knew the question, what he wanted to do in Rwanda. He wanted to work on one father, Metro, and in region, Great Congo. I was surprised because I was born there, and my family were living there, and I knew Metro. So when he told me that he wants to make a research on this region, on this man, I think now it's okay. Because I have been president of Ibuka in France. Ibuka means, I think that it is important to say, Ibuka, it means remember or never forget. And I have been president of this association in France for 10 years. But I never done research on the ground about genocide. What I know is this: my family was living there, and they have been, all of them have been killed. And when they were being killed, Father Mendo was there. He was there. He assisted. He was there. They were being killed, and he didn't want to speak with me about this. So I talked to Philippe, if you want to do this, everything you want, I will do if I can. So I tried to help as a could, and I think that he made a good thing, a good work. I have not finished to read the published work, but I know the work before being published. I am happy because I gave the book to him. I received the book before him. This book, I think, addresses 3 challenges. The first one is genocide. We think that genocide, we think that the 20th century is already started. has been the center of genocide. We normally talk about the genocide of Armenia, Holocaust, genocide of Tutsi. But I think that there are other genocide, like Nama, Hero in Nama, Namibia. You have maybe you know. We know also what happened in Srebrenica, in former Yugoslavia, and we can also say what happened in Cambodia. So I think that the history of humanity has been confronted many times with this crime. So I think that it is important to know what it means. It means it's not a great killings. It's a particular killing when a group needs target, when a group is targeted with the aim to eradicate all of them. Babies, children, wife, men. When there is the intention and there is an act, when there's the intention to do so, and if they do something, you have the intention to eradicate and you kill them. And when this crime is committed, I think that everybody of us is concerned. When they want to eradicate people, it is not the individual, it is what is inside them. And what is inside me is inside you. That is what we want to kill. But sometimes they need to make difference between themselves and those they killing. So it's a process of dehumanization. They know that if we kill a human being, it is not possible to kill a human being. So they need to make a process they need to make to do the difference between themselves and those who are being killed. And we have made a result of this process of dehumanization in Rwanda. We have published the book in 1995. It's called in Rwanda, in Rwanda, the Media of Genocide. Rwanda, the Media of Genocide. It's an exhibition here. I was very surprised to discover it. It's about, you have some article that you can find in this book. It is the first thing which is made to the dehumanization of the victim, to make it easy to kill them. So I told you that if you want, I can give it to you, this book. This is French, maybe you will try to understand. So that I think that the vast challenge is genocide itself. I think that it is important to understand what is it, when it is happening, and maybe what can we do. The second challenge is the churches, because it speaks about churches. Here is a church. In Rwanda, there are the first one is the Catholic Church. Myself, I am a Catholic one. The Catholic people in Rwanda, I think that we are 62% of people is Catholic. And the church in Rwanda, you meet them everywhere. everywhere you meet a church. And during the colonial era, it was a principal center of, what can I say, of diffusion of what you can call civilization. Because it's a country without towns. So the mission has had an important role. It was a center not only for evangelization, but it was the schools were near the mission. We have the center of development. We have the center of health. So it is in Rwanda. The missions, Catholic missions, have an important power. Everybody knows where the mission, and on Sunday, many people are going there. So the mission is the center of power in Rwanda. And that is why in 1994, many people, the Tutsi, went in the church because they think they will not be killed in the church, because you have the value of the church. So they went there in the church. They are opened, we have space, many people can gather there. They went to them because the killings made before 1966, 1964, people went in the church and were not killed. In 1995, they went in church and they had been killed in churches. They have been killed in churches by Christians in churches, have been killed by Christians before Jesus and the other. That is why it's not only the destruction of people, of human, to the destruction of values. It's a destruction of values. It's when you know that in Catholic, in the Bible, we say we have to love each other. And you don't kill. I think it is 5 or so. In the church, when we say, when we learn, don't kill. People have been killed by other Christians, and sometimes by the priest participated in the killings or was accomplice with the killers. So in this time of genocide, the time of destruction of all things we think might protect everybody. And that is why I tell to Philippe that he made, when he made research about church, it's a research about the destruction of values, and maybe to tell to the church, to the priest, to the hierarchists, to say, what did you do? What did you do? What are you doing now to restore these values, to restore humanity? Not only to say again, don't kill. People have been killed. And the last challenge is something that we could call the work that the social science at the universities, in the schools, should do. Because we don't understand how these things arrived. We know what happened in Second War. We know that it was said that never again, but never again has been again done. This is a challenge for social science to address, to make research about the thing, to make letters, to make know, because we have some people are killed, and some people are saying nothing happening. So we need this work to make know what happened, to make know in South Africa what happened in Rwanda, because it's very far. The journalists have made the work. Some of them have been in Rwanda when during the genocide and after the genocide, and have tried to make something. But we need something which help in schools, something which could help in the center of reflection, of memory, and the memory is not possible if there is no knowledge based on research, on solid research about what have been made in this context. So I can stop here. I gave you a text. You can distribute it if you want. It was a text about the context, and I may correct it. You can distribute it. I have no problem with that. But under embargo, if you want, if I can say this. And now, if you have a question, if you have some questions possible, I shall give some answers. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Denis. Thank you, Mr. Kabanda. At this point in time, I would like to invite, I would like to open the question and answer session. And I will invite questions from the physical audience that is here in the building. And I will also invite questions from our audience via YouTube and via Zoom. And to begin, I have a question that I would like to open the floor with as people are gathering their questions. And it is about the relationship between, and this is for both Professor Denis and Mr. Kabanda, the relationship between religious identity and social, cultural, or ethnic identity. Because you've mentioned that Rwanda is a very Christian country. And I wonder if there is a distinction between, through your research in writing this book, if there is a distinct religious identity as a Christian, or if there is a distinct identity as a historical identity as a Tutsi or a Hutu, that is a social cultural identity, or do the two overlap? And what does it mean to have either of these identities in this context? Please use one of the mics. You can sit, yeah, absolutely. You can just, yeah.
Thank you for the question. We talk about identity. The first thing to say, from what I can understand from Rwanda, it's not a problem of religious identity as such, in the sense that the perpetrators and the victims have exactly the same religion belonging, which is Christian. There's a small number of Muslims, many Catholics, a certain number of Protestants, Anglicans, Pentecostal. So it's not a question of one religious group against another at all. They were the same. And also the same language and the same cultural, African type of cultural background. So that's not in that sense an issue. The issue is that over time, from the 19th century, the idea has been developed that in that part of Central Africa, to a certain point also in Uganda, of course also in Burundi, you had two groups of people. I don't speak of the Twa, which is a small group, less than 1%. Two groups of people, Hutu and Tutsi, which do have some differences, but not clear-cut differences. And a lot of it is more imagined than real. What do I mean by that? It's true that, like in South Africa everywhere, you've got people with different backgrounds, socio-economic backgrounds. Some people closer to political power than others. Some people that are richer than others. But it's not clear-cut. It's a fluid boundary between the two, right? And that, so we find documents from the late 19th century, the Hutu and Tutsi. But where the church plays a role, to answer your question, the missionaries, but also the colonial agents, they misunderstood badly what happened. And they came with the crazy idea that some were real Rwandans, real Africans, and those came from somewhere, Abyssinia, Egypt, Ethiopia, they were strangers. And some went even further, not a genocide, they weren't even human beings, they could be killed, doesn't matter. So the church contributed to a binary system, rigid, with Hutu and Tutsi, which actually caused eventually the genocide. The building up of this ideology of two completely different groups has been a recipe for blood. So that would like I to say, so the church is not different religious identities. I would not even use the word racial identity because it's ridiculous, not too racist, not even ethnic identity. I don't know how to call it, it's two different groups. So I'm one of those, and my friend Marcel as well, is that all of that is a construction based on a few things which are real. I don't say there's no difference between Hutu and Tutsi. No, but the way it has been rigidified, there's a historic responsibility of the churches, mostly the Catholic Church, but I must say also the Protestant churches, and I could give you evidence. I just hope it helps a bit to understand this. And until now, let me finish this sort of lens, sort of way of understanding the problem, unfortunately, is not gone. There are certain sectors of the churches which carry on with this binary system. And the future is not clear. We're still in the middle of that problem. By refusing to recognize the reality of the genocide, which is based on a false ideology, which then does not allow to accept the crimes of the other side, because some Hutu have also been victims. Let's say it clearly. I will not go into that. It's not that one side is white, the other black. We must go into the complexity of social, political, and cultural events. Thank you.
Would you like to just press the power button, continue to do it? Yes. That's it. Yes.
I am not sure I understand very well the question, but you have here on the ground floor identity card. There is no religious of the people. They use an ethnic group. You are Hutu, Tutsi, Hutu. But you get to know on the basis of identity card is that this is Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, of which has no religion. That's the first thing. The other thing is that normally in the Catholic, Hutu and Tutsi were primed together, or in Catholic Church, or in Protestant Church, or the Anglican Church, they were primed together. There was no problem about this one. But in the 1994, we have had many people saying, I am, first of all, I am a Hutu. It's in the book, this book, I showed the propaganda said, you can change your religion. You can change the country where you live, but you can't change your ethnic group. It means that something that we which is proper, which you can change. There's not about religion. I can't know how to translate primacy of the identity. The first identity is the group to which you belong. And that is why they can kill in the church, because this is not important. What is important is your personal identity. The thing which is important is that you are the son of this man, and this man was the son of this man. It is not important to know that you are praying in this church on this organ. This is not important.
Yes, thank you. That answered my question, because I wanted to understand in a time of an emergency, which identity overtakes. Is it because I'm a Christian, therefore I'll do this, or is it because I'm a Hutu or Tutsi? Thank you. You did answer my question. Yes, and so we now have another question.
Hi, I've got a question from the chat on Zoom from Maria. She says, thanks for this fruitful discussion. I'd like to ask Professor Denis about the role of the religious leaders, priests among others, who betrayed their communities, allowing the genocide in their churches. I was impressed when I visited Rwanda and their churches as memory sites. Thank you.
So it's a vast question. And it allows me to something I didn't have the time to say. Most clergy, including women, sisters, were not directly involved in the genocide. Some were, I must say, and it's very difficult even to understand. Some were actively involved, but there's a small minority. In my book, there's a chapter where I have a sort of table, and I take them all, and you could see it's documented. Although some is not documented, it is documented. So it's not mostly that problem. The different case studies I mentioned Abbé Manon. I also studied the history of the president of the Presbyterian Church, Michel Tabireyesu, and the case of Bishop Misago, the Bishop of Gikongoro, as example. The problem is that, number one, many church leaders are very close to the government which orchestrated the genocide. For example, in Butare anyway. So proximity to Hutu extremists in government who organize or at least allow to happen the genocide. This proximity was a problem. Another one is that it was sometimes also close to the killers for a number of reasons, having beers with them, knowing them, etc., etc. So this proximity is a problem. And then what I maintain the silence. If they had used their authority, and that's what Marcel mentioned, the clergy had a lot of authority. It's a very religious country, Rwanda. We're not sure, we cannot promise, but it's very likely that a lot would not have happened. They put their foot down and say, no, never, that's completely anti-Christian to kill your neighbor. They didn't say that, not hardly, or vaguely. And they sort of said, everybody is concerned. They confuse the situation. There was indeed a war on military field, but they didn't say that the aggressors, in the big majority, the people who were hunting Tutsi people to death. It's true that some Hutu also died. I don't deny that. But it was completely uneven. It was mostly Tutsi, close to 1 million. So they didn't clarify the thing. So what they did is to be half completely guilty and half for being innocent. They were somewhere in between the two. At the local level, there are exceptions. I want to give one beautiful exception in a place called Rwango, Palatine from Poland. To protect these people, he lie down on the floor like Jesus Christ in cross, and the killers stopped. They didn't kill any people. I spoke to a survivor whose life was saved because this priest, he didn't say anything. he made the cross with his own body. And then the people were impressed and stopped killing him. But that's an exception. It's called Stanubanya. So very few did that. They sort of were wishy-washy, if you like. And as I said, they didn't challenge the political authorities properly. They didn't excommunicate them. They didn't speak on radio maybe they did not know the word genocide. But I mean, the reality of the genocide was very clear. It was an extermination program of all Tutsi one by one. They didn't, I don't know, single one actually made a speech on that. I don't know if it helped. So at the parish level, the diocesan level, the level of the church, at the ecumenical level, because there's been two important statements of Catholic and Protestant together. All those statements were wishy-washy. They were not clear. They actually in fact, they had no impact. And some of them, and that's even worse, they reproduced the Hutu extremist propaganda and say the real problem is the FPR coming from the north, etc. So saying, forget about the Tutsi, that's not the issue. The problem is the FPR, which is completely insane when you think about it. Not that they were injured, they were not injured. They committed war crimes, but it has nothing to do with the genocide. That's what I could say in a nutshell. I don't know if you want to add anything.
I should add this. The problem is that in the genocide, when in 1990, didn't begin in 1994. The propaganda, the racism in Rwanda began many times before this period. And in this period, we have this propaganda, we have the discrimination, we have the killings. And in this period, during the 30 years, nothing has been said. It is difficult to prevent the killings when they began, but you can stop before they began. And before they began, nothing has been said. Now, after the genocide, the suffering of society is the danger. Some people are saying nothing has happened in Rwanda. And when you are a priest, when you are a nun, whatever, you can help civil to understand what happened. And but when you say nothing happened, and some priests are saying things like that, it is to continue to make suffer people. It is to maintain this propaganda alive. It's not to prepare the Rwandan society to live together tomorrow.
We have more questions in the chat.
But before we go, is there a question maybe from this physical audience before we take another question from the Zoom? Oh, yeah, there's one. Okay, I'll take it.
Okay, I don't have much knowledge about this, but in terms of what happened with the Tutsis and the Hutus, would you say that this all stems from colonization in terms of the tactics with divide and conquer, whereby in terms of power, I'm not sure who came into power back in Rwanda, but didn't they give it to them? I think, was it the majority or the minority? If anybody.
Yeah, I can say something about that. I would say yes. It was with some responsibility of the German and Belgian colonial officials. You know, colonists, I was born in Belgium, so my ancestors didn't go to the Congo, I can say, they didn't go. But anyway, the society comes from has been a colonial society, so I must take responsibility in that way. Even if I'm South African now, I've taken South African nationality. But so the whole colonial system is the idea that the colonizer knows more than the colonized, even on himself or herself. So that they know what they are. So they came with this crazy idea I described before. It is a name for it, called hermetic theory. That's the Tutsi are not real Rwandans, they are strangers. So that's a responsibility of the colonizer. They also decided that those Tutsi are good people for us. Let's give them advantages, more education, more this, more that. So they created a rift, a gap between the two groups. They could have done otherwise. So they contributed to the position, the conflict, tension, which eventually led to the genocide. So that started in colonial times. So I would say yes. In fact, to rule, you divide people. They divided people. And also another thing they did. What happened is that the Tutsi, colonial times, congregated, came together around a certain king called the Mwami in Nyanza. And the colonizer destroyed the Hutu kingdoms. In retrospect, that was a disaster because it gave the impression that only Tutsi as a king and the Hutu was just small people, like, like slaves, which is not true, but that gave that impression. And the colonial government, the destruction of the Hutu kingdoms, in retrospect, has been very bad news. And I could go on and on. So these are colonial contexts for sure.
Perfect. We have another question from Zoom. Their name is UR, I don't know. Where is the turning, I think you've answered a bit of this, but where is the turning point to distinguishing institutional responsibility from individual responsibilities when some religious leaders participated in the killings?
Yep. Okay. I like this question because it's a real debate. I didn't speak much of what happened after the genocide. The Catholic Church has been struggling with what to say, what to do, different levels. The local people, the clergy, the bishops, and Rome, the Vatican, the Holy See. They've been struggling exactly on that point. It's quite easy to say we were never brought up, just like a pedophile priest. That doesn't question it so much. It's not so challenging. It's sad and difficult to accept. When we say, when there's a systematic problem in the institution which allowed that to happen, a structural problem, then it's harder to accept. That's exactly the problem of the Catholic Church in Rwanda and the other churches, actually, the Adventist, for example. There's a famous case of the Adventist Church, the Anglican Church, etc. So yes, there's a bit of both. It's too easy to say a few bad people. We need to look at how that happened and to question the model of evangelization, the model of church government, the model of how to deal with institutional, to use a religious language, sin. We need to change the idea of the church, that the church can be sinful. If you're Christian, you say, in fact, why not? When you look at the Gospels, it's present everywhere that there are structural problems. So I would say, then what has happened, as I said already, the Presbyterian Church, I don't have the time to go into it, in a remarkable way, came quickly after only 2 years, and as a certain synod in December 1996, to accept the responsibility of the Presbyterian Church as such. Quite remarkable. It's mostly because those who have been linked to the government, genocidal government, were not there. They were in the Congo or Ghana. But anyway, but those who made that decision were Hutu and Tutsi together. The Catholic Church was struggling much more with this, but I can say from 97, 98, and up to 2000, there's been a jubilee process, a synodal process, with what you call a Christian gacaca, lots of interaction between victims and perpetrators, etc., etc. A remarkable process which, to a certain point, has allowed a certain number of things to be said. And it ended up with a confession of grief, but not the full one, not the church as such. And up to this day, the Catholic Church, I think, is a bit struggling with that. So I don't want to go to say more, but I think it's a good question. Thank you.
My question is to Mr. Marcel. I wanted to ask a question, sorry. I wanted to ask, so seeing that you lost all your family to Mr. Nassau, seeing that you lost all your family at the church, how did that not demotivate you to continue believing in churches or Catholic Church? And how often do you visit Rwanda?
If I understand the question, I wanted to say that this is something which is, how can I say it, contradiction in one, something which I can't understand. After the genocide, I thought that nobody will go to the church. In 1994, I went for the first time in Rwanda, and I was in Harama, and I have seen the dead in the church, and the clothes which are here. They were in the church, and everywhere in the church. And I was thinking how people will go again in the church. How priests will go in the church and to pray, to make as usual. But what I see now is, I don't know if something has changed. You have some people who are saying, we are saying that they need so, but in general, churches are full of people on Sunday. Every day, people go to mass. The churches have been, they make nettoyage. They have been cleaned. And people go there as usual. Why? Some people say, I have survived. God save me. Or they go to the church, not the servant, but those who participated in genocide or who the relatives, they go in the church because in the church they speak about pardon, forgiveness. In the church they speak about forgiveness. So it's good for all of them to go. Everyone has something to win, to earn, to understand. It helps somebody. Somebody has something. They find in the church something that help him to survive. I think that myself, I go to the church, but I know in the church people have been killed. That's the problem. Somebody was the tension between institution and individual, and on individual level, killings have been banned. But the role of the institution to restore the situation. We don't think that it is the problem of institution. The church didn't say go and kill, but it didn't say it is not allowed to kill. Even now, they should say to the individual who killed to accept it should be better. But the church, the institution doesn't do this. And I would also say I wanted also to address the question about colonial era and racism. We wrote, we made a book which is that is Rwanda Racism and Genocide. It is a very long history. I can go through this history of racism, of the process of racialization of Rwanda. This book has been written by me, myself, and Jean-Pierre Chrétien. It is, unfortunately, it has not been translated in English, and that is a problem for us.
Thank you very much, and I can't wait to read the book. It's so important, and I'm looking very much forward to reading it. I have many questions, but maybe two very quick ones. Concentrating on rescue. So when we were investigating for our exhibition, many those that rescued cited the church, cited God as why they rescued their neighbor. So it's the opposite of what you were saying. So on the side of the rescuers, individuals, sisters, and so on, there was that. And I wonder if that came, and if you can share some of those stories. We have one survivor here that speaks to schools, Sylvester Sedakeye, a German sister saved his life, you know, so you have the rescue stories as well. And then the other quick question is, in the Gacaca process, did priests or sisters or nuns or anyone was found guilty and is in jail still, or was in jail for a while? Thank you.
Maybe I'll start. You know, religion can work on both sides. And I will start by saying that Christianity has been abused, has been misused, has been manipulated. And Marcel mentioned it. To put it in simple words, is the whole notion that the Hutu extremists in Teramwe, the propaganda on Radio Bill Collins said, yes, before Christ was Tutsi, the church was Tutsi, the Virgin Mary was Tutsi. Now God is no longer true. God abandoned you. God is Hutu. The Virgin Mary is Hutu. And it's exactly what we spoke about before. The so-called ethnic identity replaced any other identity. So there's been a manipulation of the Bible, of religious symbols. And an example is that if you go to different churches, you'll see that a number of images of Jesus Christ, Virgin Mary are decapitated. The Hutu extremists literally cut the head of Christ, Jesus, and the Virgin Mary. You say, aha, you look, the Tutsi Mary, look what you are now, you don't have a head anymore. And it's all over, now lots and lots. So, but at the same time, you're perfectly right. I don't think that those who saved lives, sheltered people, took risks, explicitly say, I do that because I'm a Christian. They just did it. But it shows that their faith was strong enough to stop them from swallowing the propaganda and the ideology, the ethnic ideology, and they just kept their common sense that my neighbor is my neighbor. Or even in the family, because there have been many murders within the family. We did speak about that. There were lots of mixed families. And sometimes the father would kill his wife, vice versa, or their children. There's been horrible stories inside the family. But a certain number of them said, they stopped early enough and said, what I'm doing? I'm a Christian. And they remembered, you don't kill. So I would say, for me, the faith played a role at that level to stop them from joining the murderers, joining the crowd, and understanding, that's crazy. That would be my answer. And then, of course, after the genocide, there's been more reflection and lots of discussion, and that sort of faith has held a certain number, and in one of the chapters, the fourth chapter, I look at what happened immediately after the genocide in both churches, Catholic and Presbyterian, and there's been a whole movement of recognition of the horror of the genocide on Christian ground, which is very important. You can only move beyond if you recognize the evil. The recognition of the genocide as genocide is essential. unless you're going to redo it again. And at that level also, Christian faith, Christian theology, Christian interaction, I think has played a role. People step back and say, what does our faith tell us about those things that happen? In brief, that's what I can answer. To add to that?
You asked if non-priests have been condemned. It's a process. Yes. In the first process in Belgium concerned the two nuns who have been condemned for 10 and 15 years for their complicity in the genocide. The International Tribunal in Arusha has sentences to prison in life for life, one priest.
I can be more specific because there's a whole chapter in the book on that, actually. It's one more reason for reading it. No, there's a lot more than that. There's a table, you could look. First of all, who prosecuted the organizers and perpetrators? Arusha, International Tribunal, a number of Rwandan tribunals, and then other tribunals, for example, in France, Belgium, Italy, etc. So you need to distinguish. Arusha, I think is 6, and then prosecuted. One died in prison, and one was declared not innocent, but not enough evidence. I think 7, eventually 5 have been condemned for long sentences, particularly this priest in Nyange at Serumba. That's Arusha. And then in Rwanda itself, I would say roughly 15, 20, 25, I'm not too sure. And then in Europe, I mean, Marcel is correct, 2 sisters, Benedictine sisters from Sovo, have been condemned in Brussels in 2001, and a certain number of other cases. What is interesting is that I think I've got a list of 30, 35, 40, I cannot say exactly the number, who have been actually condemned. Some condemnation has been challenged, but on the whole, I think it's quite solid. But you also all those who were never caught, and I know quite a few myself, who should have been caught, but they got away with murder, literally. So don't think the list is exhaustive, not at all. And then those who have been actually, who died too early to be arrested, etc., etc. So that list is not complete, but those have been prosecuted to the end, and also quite a certain number actually, for lack of evidence, they've been let free. So we've got all sorts of scenarios, but certainly there's been a certain amount of prosecution with hard evidence.
No one else has a question. I'll ask a final one from the chat, and maybe I'm aware of time. Yeah, I think it's actually a lovely question to end on. It asks, what does prayer look like in Rwanda today? So what are churches like? What is the state of this after the betrayal of the churches?
I would like to hear Marcel, but I will answer first and give him a chance. First of all, there's been immediately after the genocide, especially at the level of Catholic Church, tension between church and state. It's a complete fallacy, it's a lie. There's been persecution of the church as propaganda, but there's been tension for the reason that you can easily understand. Then I would say since about 2000 and after, there's still a bit of a discomfort, suspicion, but on the whole, the relationship is not that bad. That's one thing. Now, we must give credit to church people, including NGOs from overseas, from other countries, and Rwandans, for doing a lot for allowing people to talk, to get healing. I don't like to speak of reconciliation, that's a tricky word, but at least to move forward. And Christians have played a major role in that process. Still now, it's not finished. So we must also say what the church people have actually done a lot of good things after. And my fear, and that's the negative part, there's still, because of guilt, because of false reasons, using the problems in the current government as an excuse for denying the genocide, which is, to me, like a crime. It's not because you have this and this problem with the current government that the genocide is less important. It's the opposite. It's because the genocide is horrible that you've got those problems. So a number of church people, especially in Europe, they're funny grave. They start to basically to deny the genocide in a certain way or to minimize it. Let's not talk all the time about genocide. We're sick and tired of this genocide. Let's talk about something else. That's a very dangerous discourse. And you've got church people actually are counterproductive and do harm. So it's a mixed picture, in my opinion. And Marcel already said that the churches are full. I've said it myself. So over to you. So the church today does the genocide.
The church today in Rwanda, I think that is in a bad situation, in an uncomfortable situation, not bad, but not comfortable. They are not comfortable. They are not comfortable because they know what's happening in Rwanda. Many priests have been killed, but the church as institution can't ask the state to make prosecution. So they forgot the person, the staff who had been killed. I don't know in which year it was the rescue was wanted to make some church the museum of genocide because people have been killed in the church. They said that they have been killed in this church. They have to stay there so that people will know that here, people in this place, people have been killed. The church didn't accept this because they said, if we are the church for anybody, we are not the church for the Tutsi killed. This means that the situation is uncomfortable for the church. It's uncomfortable because something, in some way, they were in the young situation of those who killed. Some way they know that they failed to speak aloud, to speak stop, to speak no. They know this. And so that is why the situation is not comfortable. And when an individual, a priest or a sister is accused of genocide, of complicity of genocide, he say, oh, it is not me, individual, it is the institution who is accused. So it's something which is not clear. Until now, it's not clear. I think that they hope that it will be clear one day. But now I can say that it's an uncomfortable situation.
Professor Denis, Mr. Kabanda, I have to say thank you. If there is absolutely no one else who would like to say anything, I will close the session. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and thank you for your generosity in answering the questions. Some of them were very difficult. Thank you very much. Is there anything you would like to say in conclusion?
No, my conclusion is that let's look at the future generation. Something like this, with so many initiatives, is to give a better future to the next generation that it could avoid that. Learn from the past. And by knowing the past, we are in a better position to avoid the same mistakes.
Two things or three. Thank you for this, Ellen. The second, you have quoted Primo Levi when you began saying that the most dangerous are those people who does say no words. That I think that the most dangerous are those people who don't want to know. And the last thing is, as I invite you to read the book because of the methodology which is used. I think that it's good, as he used to do, to speak to everybody, to rescue you and to those maybe better at us. So it's a good approach, and I invite you to read this book then.
The genocide against the Tutsi and the Rwandan Churches, Between Grief and Denial, written by Professor Philippe Denis. Thank you very much. The book is available, right? For those of you who are here at the Johannesburg Holocaust Genocide Centre, there are copies of the book available tonight. However, in the future, the book will also be available at our cafe, Easy's downstairs. So I hope that those of you who are here tonight will be able to purchase the book.
And if I may do a bit of commercial, those in Rwanda or in Uganda, there will be an African edition published by Fountain Publishers. And if some of the listeners are in Kigali, most probably it would be a library Currey. And then those who are not comfortable in English, we plan a French translation, but it will take probably 2 years. And there will be an ebook. And I also want to say there's a book launch prize. To be honest, it's quite expensive, especially for South African. But you've got quite a good discount. If you buy it this month, particularly here, it is 48 British pounds instead of 70 this month until the end of March, including here.
Yes, well, thank you. I think that's very, very generous. Yes, so Mr. Kabanda said you must buy, please try and buy today. Yes. Thank you very much. And thank you all for being part of the session. And for those of you joining us via Zoom and via live stream on YouTube, thank you very much for joining us. There will be a recording of this session for those of you who missed it or who came in towards the end. There will be a recording that will be posted on our YouTube channel. Thank you. Good night and be safe. Thank you.